Loki is a spin-off TV series that was basically created because Marvel fans loved Tom Hiddleston's Loki and wanted more. As with any TV series or movie in the Marvel universe, or indeed any universe involving superpowers, VFX was a necessity, and multiple VFX houses were called in to work on the series. Rise, Luma Pictures, Industrial Light and Magic, FuseFX, Trixter, Rodeo FX, Method Studios, Cantina Creative, Crafty Apes, and Digital Domain all worked together to provide the 2,524 VFX shots needed for the series. The Time Stage hologram was designed to follow the Time Variance Authority's retro aesthetic. The Time Stage theatre itself was a physical set, and the Time Stage visualizations were influenced by its design. For the Time Stage in motion, the VFX team was told to look at schools of fish or flocks of birds, like the murmuration of starlings. Using this information as a reference, they evolved the motion of a comprehensive particle system in Houdini, and actually coded rotational and spatial properties of quaternion mathematics into the system. Once they had the complex motion dynamics of the hologram, they then added self-illuminating reflective and translucent qualities. The tricky part was getting it all to work together along with the footage from the Avengers Endgame. The Timekeepers are actually 100% CG, and all three are based on the vocal performance from a single actor, Jonathan Majors, who is also the actor who plays He Who Remains in the final episode. No motion capture was used, and all three Timekeepers were hand animated. The idea was for them to be lizard-like but still humanoid, similar to how they appear in the comics. Digital sculptures created a 3D maquette. Then they added texture, making the skin look cool and wet like that of a reptile, and giving the fabric properties similar to scaly skin. Then they added metallic objects like the helmet and chestplate. This was to add realism for when they discover that they are in fact robots. Working, as always, with reference material provided by Marvel, the VFX team created CG assets and 2.5D matte paintings for the monoscape. For the actual city of Shiru, because each structure was so unique, they ended up building most of the city by hand using LiDAR data given to them by production. The journey to Shiru was shot on a backlot on a set that was basically sand and blue screens. And although Digital Domain knew that every hillside, structure, and vehicle would have to be built digitally, they ended up having to recreate almost everything from the original plates too, because of blue light spill from the blue screens on the sand. For the destruction of the city of Shiru, the director wanted one long shot with no cuts, but the sequence was actually shot as a series of shorter vignettes, each with practical effects like explosions, smoke, and fire. These practical effects were then isolated and removed by the VFX team so that they could replace the background. Then the effect was laid back on and enhanced with digital effects layers. Some parts of the shot required over 60 custom effect layers, but the end result is one incredibly dramatic, continuous 4,500 frame shot that was over 3 minutes long. The Void is an endless rolling grassy landscape. The live-action plates were shot on a stage with the ground covered in grass. This set was scanned and a digital version of the set was built. This meant that they would have exactly the same ground terrain as their extensions no matter what scene they shot. In order to reach the Void, the person or object needed to be pruned. This pruning effect was created by FuseFX, but the portal that opens in the Void was created by Industrial Light and Magic. The Void is packed full of vehicles, people, and objects that the TVA deems a threat to the sacred timeline, so ILM actually had some fun with this, placing some humorous objects that you may not have noticed the first time you watched the episode, like a photograph of a nuclear-powered tank built by Chrysler in the 50s, the Stark Tower with the Queng logo, and let us know in the comments if you've seen any others. For Loki Alligator, ILM had to first find reference material and photographs of an American alligator that was roughly the same size as the blue plushy one used on set. Once they had this, they could then sculpt, texture and color the asset. However, once they had it looking good under normal light, they found the color correction for the sequence was predominantly blue, and this cancelled out the yellow coloring and left Loki Alligator looking black and virtually textureless. So the team had to pre-grade Loki's alligator textures to compensate for these color changes. ALIOTH was made up of two different clouds, a base pyroclastic cloud and a secondary wispy layer. ILM used a proprietary GPU-based solver called Plume to simulate ALIOTH. But, as with any fluid simulation, or indeed any fluid, these tend to want to continue expanding and flowing and not to be retained. So the hardest job was to give this flowing cloud a shape so that it was able to portray its intentional motion and look like a cloud monster without giving it a hard physical outline that would make it look like a monster filled with clouds. Miss Minutes was created by Luma Pictures and took a lot of trial and error to get right. Copying once again the retro aesthetic from the TVA referencing animation like Betty Boop and Felix the Cat, they created the 2D versions of Miss Minutes. Once they had that design okayed, they then had to create the 3D holographic version. They decided to continue with the hand-drawn aesthetic, but add a holographic and more fluid element to her, making her translucent and self-illuminated, but also adding a scrolling line effect that you'd see on old TV sets. To give Miss Minutes a more fluid motion in the 3D world, they actually did some motion capture to animate her rather than having everything keyframed. On the set, a cylindrical LED lamp was used so that the actors knew where Miss Minutes was supposed to be. It also threw light on the objects around it so that later, when the digital Miss Minutes was added to the shot, her self-illuminescence would be reflected on the objects around her. Trixter had the incredible job of creating the Citadel at the end of time and coming up with the entire backstory of why it was placed at the back of the universe. The idea was that double black holes focused light into the ring that represents the sacred timeline, and the Citadel was at the back of the universe because it's where you'd be furthest away from the Big Bang and therefore could witness the creation of the universe in full. Trixter had to storyboard the entire travel through space shot, identifying what astronomical phenomenon they would see, what they would look like, in what way they would appear, and basically choreograph the speed and direction of the journey. Just like every episode in the Loki series, this last one has a few Easter eggs that are hidden in this specific sequence, so try scrubbing through it and let us know what you find in the comments. Please give us a like if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget the links to the music used in this video are in the video description, and as always, be sure to let us know in the comments which movie VFX you'd like to see behind next.